Okay, well, good evening, everyone. First of all, can I just get confirmation that people can see the peak and the start of the presentation?
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so tonight's session is on child safety, and straight up, thank you for everyone for giving up your valuable time. It's not intended to be an extensive session. There is a truckload of information out there. So what we've tried to do is make it easy because we're very aware that you're all volunteers and pulled in many different directions. So how we're going to, let me just work out, go to the next page. So for tonight, we're going to start off with a bit of a who's who on the call, and we'll talk about the child safe journey that we've been through to date. And then kick right into what resources, the important stuff that we know you want to know, what resources are available to you, what should you be doing when you're bringing people into your organization. And we understand that this is, we understand that as volunteer organizations, you're often kind of just keen for people to put their hand up, and that in itself is a bit of a challenge. A question of, well, we'll retouch the working with children checks because we understand that that is a topic that we get a lot of questions. Just some like who to contact if there's an immediate risk, and obviously any opportunities for questions always available. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. In terms of the people on the call today, we are fortunately joined by Matt Sipley, who is the Office of Children's Guardian Child Safe Coordinator. For those of you who have been on committees for a while, Matt will not be a stranger to you. He has been involved in a number of these sessions over the last few years. And we also have Deanna Waters, who is the New South Wales Triathlon President, on the line, and myself, the CEO. So let's just have a little bit of a conversation about the child safe journey and kind of how we've got here. So this is the fourth session that we've run over the past 4 years, and it's part of our ongoing commitment to giving you guys as the clubs and volunteers some support and guidance and education on child safe standards and on child safety in your club. And the truth of the matter is, it tends to be, this is only a problem until when it's a problem, and when it's a problem, oh boy, is it a big problem, right? And that's kind of how it works. Clubs can contact me in a bit of a tizzy. They've got a big issue that they need to deal with. So what we'd like to do is just be a little proactive as opposed to reactive, and educate you all on some simple stuff or some steps that you can take to attempt to mitigate issues before they've arisen. So in 2013, there was a Royal Commission into the institutional response to child sex abuse, which is known as the Royal Commission. And there were some overarching and significant impacts into both sport and recreation sector that flowed from this. One of them was the 10 child safe standards, which is essentially a 52-page document which outlines the 10 standards that are expected of New South Wales-based clubs that deliver programs for juniors.
6787373. Thank you.
So the other ones.
I don't know what the other one is. It could be the combat.
Okay, sorry, just muting Thomas. So from 2023, from last year when we ran this session, the Office of Children's Guardian, let me just mute whoever just joined us. If you could mute yourself, that would be great. I'll mute you for you. So from last year, the Office of Children Guardian was allowed to take action to ensure organisations comply with these child safe standards. But fear not, as Matt will reaffirm, they aren't particularly interested in handing out huge fines. That is the ultimate carrot stick that they've got in their arsenal, but they are far more focused on capability building and support rather than these punitive actions. And if you take nothing away from tonight, the one message is that you are not alone. if you've got an issue. There are people and places you can go to for assistance and support if you have an issue. So straight to the important stuff, what resources are available for you as a affiliated club to New South Wales Triathlon? Well, the first port of call that I would recommend is our Working with Children handbook. This was just updated as we do every year. It's an important document from my perspective because it'll provide you information on what are the relevant policies, procedures, and documents that you need to understand as a senior leader in your club. We've also done the hard work for you. We've read through the 52-page document that outlines the 10 child safe standards. We've tried to provide you some practical and usable suggestions on how you can implement those standards in your club. And we've summarized basically a 52-page document down to kind of 10 dot points that you should be able to read and go, you know what, that's realistic. We can do this. Next point, yep, we can do that. Actually, there's some stuff here that we can really get done and know that we're complying with these 10 child safe standards. These standards, by the way, are unique to New South Wales legislation. And I guess that's why New South Wales Triathlon takes the lead in educating you on this annually. It also provides information. There's a section on who requires working with children checks, what's the process for requesting this, checking it, etc. There's also a section which gives you information on how to obtain further resources and information. So as I said, there's a never-ending supply of documents out there that you could access. And the process to react, respond, and deal with an immediate concern if you have an immediate concern that a youth or child in your club is in immediate harm. There's the link there. Obviously, I'll follow tonight's session up by sending you all an email. I also sent those links out in about 5 reminders that I sent about tonight's session. So hopefully that handbook is not a secret to you, but that would be your first port of call if you've just stepped into a role, or if you're sitting there going, oh, we haven't really focused on much child safety. What should we do? One of the things, I've put this example up. This is a document which I will also send through to you all, which Central Coast did. We're obviously fortunate because Robin Lohart runs both our junior development program, but is also involved in the Central Coast Tri Club. And when you read through this and you send it out and you get the 10 child safe standards up, you'll go, geez, they've actually really ticked quite a few good boxes off with this one document that they've put together. So it's just an example, which I don't expect any of you to start reading through it all now, but it's the type of document which you could put together for your club and then put on your website, put on social media. You could even print it off and stick it at Rego, where people rock up to tell you they've arrived to race. Put one on the bathroom. You could put one together, print a couple off, throw it in with your setup kit, bit of blue tack, chuck it up on the men's and the females' bathroom, up at Rego. If you've got a notice board or something, not just a marquee, that's the type of document that you're going to find is going to really fast track you ticking off some of these child safe standards. But more importantly than just ticking them off, it's taking you in the direction of ensuring your club is a bit more safe for juniors. Yeah, Helen, I think you've got a question. You're very welcome to unmute. By the way, I should have said up front, please, if you've got your questions, you can type it up if there's a chat. Otherwise, you can just pop your hand up, and if I notice it, I'll grab you.
So is this something we have to publicise, or is it something that we just have on the background somewhere? Do we have to put it up on our website, or like, are we obliged to put it up? What's the status of this sort of document if we adapt it?
So the answer is, part of promoting that your club is a child safe club is the communication to the membership, because there's two sides to that, right? The theory is, if someone is skirting close to the wind in terms of their behavior, what we know the research tells us is they're less likely to get involved in a club that has demonstrated publicly that you are child safe and this is in your conscious and there are structures and processes. So there is a way that you can avoid unappealing human beings coming into your club environment by being proactive and putting it out. And it's also about providing information on where people can go if they've got complaints and who they can go to. So yes, the answer is you'd want these types of documents to be public facing out there in the world. So you could chuck it, you could chuck it up on your Facebook page at some point, or, just a reminder, we're a child safe club. We've committed to the 10 child safe standards. We're abiding by it. That one post and putting some posters up around the venue and having it in everyone's conscious can go some way to protecting and safeguarding your club. So Matt and the Office of Children's Guardian are firmly of the belief. So I hope I've answered that.
Yes, thank you.
So one of the things that is part of the 10 child safe standards is conducting a child safe risk assessment risk assessment, right? Like you sit down just as you work out, right, how do we make the triathlon safe for swimmers, cyclists and runners, and that's stuff like a defib if you're at a large event, water safety in the water. We are encouraging you, and one of the parts of the 10 child safe standards is sitting down and doing a child safe risk assessment. Now, it would be acknowledged, and it has been acknowledged, that the environments that you all mostly create, I'm talking about a local club race, a local club training session for juniors, they tend to be the more low risk environments, right? The truth of the matter is, statistically, the overnight camps and the overnight stays tends to be where the biggest child safety risk is possible. That is not to say that there aren't possibilities for child safe issues at your events. But what you tend to do, and I'm generalizing because every club is unique, every club is different, but what you tend to do tends to be in the lower risk, because the truth is most juniors are brought to, if you're in, Port Macquarie, most parents are rocking up with their kids to their event, and they're staying with their kids for the majority of the experience. And they'll probably walk their kid to the toilet if their kid needs the bathroom. So the environments in which you are operating tend to be safe. So we've got 3 different child safe risk assessment templates. I should have used the word template, not tool. One that talks about clubs conducting local club races, which tends to be the majority. And we've also got a template for clubs conducting training sessions. Those are all on our website, but we are happy and ready to review your risk safety assessment, your risk assessments. We've got a gentleman in our organization who sanctions events, and risk is his bread and butter. He's 30 years of experience in risk and risk mitigation. It would be his pleasure to read through your risk assessments once you've put them together and just give you some advice and tips. And that is the benefit is Dave is already an employee of ours, so there's no costs to you. But the risk assessment is an important part of identifying where the potential risks are for your club. And it is one of the 10 child safe standards. So if you read through that, you'll go, oh yeah, number 6 is about, we've got to conduct a risk assessment. And the beautiful thing about this is that you can do it at the start of the season, and it's kind of done for the season, but that doesn't mean that it should be a document that's done and then left behind. Like it's kind of a document you'd want to have available. Anyone who new volunteers around, it kind of only works if people are aware, okay, we've got blind spots in the toilets, that's a potential risk, hazard, what's our strategy? Okay, at the start in the induction or in the in the junior athlete briefing, when we've got the 10 or 15 kids around and the parents, we say, parents, please make sure you're walking your kids to the toilet because we've identified it could be a risk. That's all, right? And that can just become business as usual. That phrase, obviously you're going to have repeat customers coming back time and time again, junior members, but that's the type of thing you can do just so you've ticked that off. Any questions? before I head on. So one of the topics that we've never really, sorry, James.
Yeah, Adam, I just had one question. When you're talking about juniors, is that classifying juniors as children under the 18 age bracket, or juniors as in under 13s?
No, under 18s, but look, the risk is obviously of a 17 and 364-day-old is a different profile. And the same in overnight environments. Everything is different, but no, a junior is under 18. So I know our membership goes to 20 something, 19, I think, is under 19s are classified as juniors in our membership structures, but for the Office of Children's Guardian, it's under 18s. So one of the things that we wanted to touch on tonight is onboarding volunteers who work with children. Now, I mean, there's a really chunky section. Let me move on. There is a really good section in the National Integrity Framework on this, and I would encourage you to read it. But the message that I wanted to go is we understand paid employees is probably, lexicon that doesn't get thrown around in your tri club at all. So let's forget about that. And on the flip side, we understand that volunteers and finding people who are willing to volunteer is in itself a huge challenge, right? But the National Integrity Framework does have some checklists and some guidelines, and all of these rules and all of this framework, the National Integrity Framework, is about making statements outwardly into the community that if you are the type of person who is inappropriate, this is not the club for you. That's what it's for. So just the very act of saying to a volunteer, hey, and by the way, I'm really referring to volunteers who work with juniors here, right? Like if your treasurer, I'm not suggesting a treasurer who just sits on a board, on a committee, needs to go through rigorous checks. But if someone comes in and goes, oh, I'm really keen to work with juniors and I want to be a junior coach in your club, right? That's great. There are no red flags. But when you read this National Integrity Framework, there are a few questions that you can ask. And I guess the purpose of them is so the person asking the question can just go, oh, I got some red flags on a few of those questions. It's just to suss the person out, specific to people who work with children. So these are all outlined. I'm not going to spend time reading through like the pages, because when you go on the National Integrity Framework document, which is all on the AusTri page, and these are all the links, you'll read it and go, wow, that's, obviously if you're talking about bringing a junior development officer into an organization, that's a whole other different level of reference checking and stuff that you would go through to ensure that the person's the right person. But it is a part of the framework. One of the recommendations is that you must conduct a quick interview, just asking a few child safe questions. And I guess the next step would be if a few red flags go up, then maybe that's time to check a few references, because ultimately you want to keep your children safe in your club. But this is not something I would suggest if someone comes up going, I can do the barbecue for you, right? That wouldn't, in my mind, be junior facing enough. I understand there could be some juniors in the environment. Juniors might eat a barbecue, but to me that wouldn't be enough contact. And Matt, jump in if what I'm saying is incorrect, for you to then start saying, okay, do you mind if I do some interviews before you start flipping sausages?
No, look, I think, Adam, your line of thought is correct, that this isn't about treating everyone exactly the same. It's for those roles that are specifically for working with children and people who are going to have, significant access to children, ongoing access. If it's some sort of one-off event and they're not actually around the kids, or if they are, they're supervised the whole time, much lower level risk in those sorts of situations.
Correct. But we do have a question up. PD, I'm not sure who you are. Oh, Pete Daly. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I got you.
There we go. You got me, Wixie.
I got you.
Mate, thanks very much. at my club, very small club, mentioned there, I do work in the child safety area as well. I actually have my members sign says that they're aware that they're eligible to remain in our club because part of our club, all persons volunteer, and that becomes employment if or have committed a serious offence. So it puts the onus back onto a person wishing to join our club. Or they are a registrable person, they're committing an offence if they sign that. They know that, and you'll tend to find that they won't sign the form. So I think when you said flipping a sausage at a barbecue and things like that, there are risks if you're not checking people and having them waive that. So that's I'd like later on, and yeah, it is something that I really think that maybe when we join up Tri Australia, we don't have to actually acknowledge anything like this, but yeah, dealt with something, and this has been a godsend to save our club. So maybe I'll send that to you.
Pete, you were kind of in and out there. I don't know if anyone else found you in and out in terms of, and I'm not just saying that, I definitely didn't catch everything you said, but what I would say is that in the last week, Oz Triathlon signed a convicted, the Oz Tri board just endorsed a new convicted policy, a convicted felon policy, which I think is kind of similar, and that's a whole policy which we're not covering tonight. But it was actually covered last night on an AusTri webinar they ran, if any of you were on that. But I'm happy to flick that through, and it's just a new policy that basically says if you're convicted, that AusTri can cancel your membership or stand you down until the outcome of your court case is heard. And if you rock up with a previous conviction, you have to let AusTri know. Now, we both know if you are, embarrassed by something or happened 30 years ago, you're unlikely to identify that when you're joining a tri club, 30 years later. But that's what the policy does say, that you're supposed to identify that. And that goes straight
because
through.
Can you hear me, Wixie?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah, you might have. I just took the effort. You might have someone who's got what they call a quashed conviction, and they believe that they don't have to acknowledge it. So, yeah, I'm just mindful. I'm because of where I work, mate. I think that it's a good thing to check everyone, and just because someone flips a sausage, I wouldn't think that they're okay. I think that we need to be checking everyone. Just don't worry if they're flipping a sausage. That's my thing. I'm going to send you what I've got at the club, Wixie, and maybe if you take that up with Tri Australia, it's actually worked quite well for us. If they don't wish to sign it, they don't have to disclose it to the club, but it puts the onus back on them, because if they've signed this document they are one of the persons that shouldn't be in a club, well, they're going to be committing an offence. Because other than that, if we allow them to join up and flip a sausage and they don't have to do a working with children check, you're not going to know who they are.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I
don't want to scare people, but we got to keep an eye on people.
No, I understand. I mean, if I can think about my own circumstance, I've definitely been down at Nippers where the canteen's been run off its feet, and my wife's gone, "Oh, do you guys want me to just jump in and help you?" And they've gone, "Yeah," desperately, and she's just jumped in. So that they certainly didn't start interviewing her about child safety. They were just happy she was jumping into the flip some sausages and make some hot dogs. So I guess we need there's definitely circumstances where where a club is going to just need a volunteer, and it's a low risk environment. But low risk is still risk, is I guess what you're identifying, Pete.
100%. Yeah, if they're a regular volunteer, even one off, I'd be encouraging the working with children check, and maybe this waiver, which I'll send to you, and if you think it's okay, you can share with the other tri clubs, because it has been a godsend for our club. I'll just leave it there.
Well, I think we might be unaligned when we get to the working with children check section, Pete. I'm just flagging in advance, but a lot of what the information we're giving here is kind of information that the Office of Children's Guardian have given us and educated us on, which we're now trying to educate the club. So ultimately,
I won't go on. You got a big meeting. Go.
No,
Thanks,
that's
Wixie.
fine. Okay.
I'll just jump in really quickly off the back of what Peter's saying, and it is worth saying that on this sort of side of recruitment, the working with children check, as Adam will get to, has sort of certain ways it needs to be done legally, and we can't kind of deviate from how it's stipulated. But as a club, you can reach the level that you want to get to. So you might want to do the child safety recruitment for everyone because you feel that everyone at your club actually has pretty decent access to the kids. And so even if someone isn't designated a child related worker needing a working with children check and all those sorts of things, you might want to include some of these child safety requirements in terms of becoming a volunteer. And then also in terms of induction and training, you could require people to do that. To give you one example from golf clubs, greenskeeper is not required to have a working with children check. They don't work with children. But I often encourage golf clubs to give their greenkeepers some child safe training because sometimes it's the greenkeeper who's the only person around when a child's in trouble. And so you might find a greenkeeper alone with a child helping them. And it's good if that person's had some training so that they can actually do a good job of it. The other thing I'll throw in, which I guess kind of reinforces what Peter's saying, one of the most common trends that I see are the people who bounce from club to club. So they're at a club and they're breaking a lot of rules, and all of a sudden they start having issues. The committee start giving them talkings to and the like. No one's quite reported anything, but the heat's coming on. They quickly bounce to another club, bounce to another club.
Mm-hmm.
One thing they're doing, they're bouncing clubs looking for the club that doesn't keep the rules, the club that doesn't pull them up and say, hey, mate, you can't do that. And so one thing that can be a really good thing to do when a new person comes along is just say, hey, look, have you belonged to any clubs previously, and actually get them to declare any clubs they've belonged to? Because one, you can then give that club a call and say, hey, did you have any problems with this person? And they might say, yeah, that person was trouble. We were ready to do disciplinary action before they left. They'll be happy to disclose that to you most likely. The other thing is you might even catch that person in a lie. So they might not tell you the clubs that they've been at. And then when you have a meet up with another club, they go, oh, is he at your club now? He was at ours last year. And now you know that person's hiding things from you. So there are little measures like that you can do with people just to give that little bit of vetting. And as Adam was saying, a lot of these measures as well is about if you show this outwardly, the person who you don't want at your club is less likely to apply to your club if your club seems like the sort of club who's doing this stuff properly.
Thanks, Matt. So to the next topic of working with children checks, and I guess what Matt has, kind of drilled into me is that the truth of the matter is working with children checks are only one way a sporting organization can keep their juniors safe. It is not the only way. So when you read the 10 child safe standards, only one of them is a working with children check. The other 9 are not. So statistically, 10% of what the Office of Children's Guardian are kind of suggesting is the way you can keep kids safe is the working with children check, but that still leaves 90% of other areas that they believe are equally important. And none of the 10 child safe standards are less or more important. They're all equally important. So the legislation, so the working with children checks is legislation, right? This is what the law tells us. And so when I say this is, I've copied this off the website, which is what has been put into the laws of New South Wales. A working with children check is required for anyone who is in a paid position, working directly face to face with children, including a coach or a manager of a junior team, and assistants in these positions. Anyone volunteering in one of those in the above who does not have a relative child participating in the team or activity being coached or managed. And let me just flag, this is one of the points that Matt constantly cops it about when we're at sessions. It's one of the most heated topics. Why, just because my child is in the team, am I exempt? Does that make me any less safe? It's not Matt's rules. He hasn't written the legislation. Jump in unless I'm misreading the situation. But this is absolutely one of the most controversial parts of the legislation, and people say it to me all the time. And then if either of the above, then the head of the club, the president, requires a working with children check. Again, Matt, you're welcome to jump in. I'm going to be frank, it's kind of a rule or a law that I've never really understood, but that's just what the legislation says.
Just one thing. If we look at grooming behaviors, so people who are working their way into positions of trust in order to get access to children, to have parents and carers trust them as well, and so that they get the sort of unfettered access. We do see people who play the long game. So people may spend years, even a decade, working their way in the public space to sort of gain a position that then allows them to abuse children. And so the reason why we have the club president requirement, so if you're a child-related organisation, if you're an organisation who works with children, you have people who require working with children checks, we want the head of the organisation to also be sort of vetted as a child-safe person. It's just a measure so that if it goes up to the top, there's a person there who isn't sort of manipulating the system from the insides. So that's why the club president, who may have zero access to children themselves, but that's the person who the buck stops with. If this is something that maybe needs to be reported to police, we need it to not be covered up. We need Adam to hear about it. We need it going up the chain of triathlon. If the club president is sort of a person who doesn't have the right interests here, that could undermine the whole process. So the whole club could be doing a great job, but the club president is undermining it from the inside. So that's why we put that requirement on them.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for clarifying that. So this is an important, this is copied, this is from the Office of Children's Guardians Compliance Team. This is the email that they've sent me and communication. So a working with children check ought only be required when the law requires it. If organisations incorrectly require their workers to have a working with children check where the law does not require them to do this, it generates increased pressure on the working with children check system. This pressure indirectly puts children at risk by redirecting worker assessment efforts from those who really need it. Additionally, a person applies for a working with children check is barred, but who does not legally require a working with children check, we cannot legally disclose that information about the check result. So I guess I'm just sharing that because what I've seen in clubs and is, when, as I said up front, when there is an issue, the first response of every committee is working with children checks for everyone. That's the first response, and I've seen it in clubs. And then when I go to the Office of Children's Guardian, they say, please educate your clubs that that's actually putting pressure on us. And it's not even if the working with children check stuff is mandated by the law of who does and doesn't require it. And New South Wales Triathlon is not above the law. I assure you that. So if you go to that handbook, there's a little matrix which also talks about who needs a working with children check as well, and who you can who it's more appropriate to give education screening to. So I would encourage you to go and have a look at that as well. This is, without a doubt, one of the more controversial topics that comes up, but we basically just take our advice from the Office of Children's Guardian on this, and that's what we are educating you all on tonight. So if there is an immediate risk in your club, where to? This graphic has been copied out of the National Integrity Framework Safeguarding. I would encourage you to have a read, but to my first point, which was highlighted, there are people you can go to ask questions, but the answer to the question is the police. If the child is in immediate risk, immediate harm, you call the police. That's your first port of call. If you don't think they're in immediate harm, or if it's historic in nature, and you don't feel like there's an immediate concern this weekend, tomorrow, today, then there's some action items and steps that you can go through. And not on the call tonight, unfortunately, but is Chris Cunningham, who would be a stranger to hopefully not many of you because he worked for us for 7 years. He is the National Integrity Manager, and all his contact details are there, but also on the next slide. So in terms of where you guys go to for help, if you do have a question about working with children check stuff, you can email the compliance at ocg.nsw.gov.au team. I find them great. When I email them, there isn't a phone number you can call, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, that gets you direct to the OCG working with Children's Check compliance team.
Email's the best way.
Email's the best way.
Yeah.
There's Matt, who I assure you doesn't work for triathlon, but will help and is great. And we've gone to him, clubs have gone to him over the last few years and asked questions. He is definitely a resource that we are very lucky to have access to. So if you have questions about the 10 child safe standards, that's absolutely a place you can go. His employment is with the Office of Children's Guardian, as I mentioned. Chris Cunningham, who's our National Integrity Manager. If you have questions about the National Integrity Framework, shoot him an email, and there's a phone number as well. And if you're not getting in touch with him, I'll give you his mobile number. Dave Williams is the man I mentioned who is great with risk assessments. So he will happily read your risk assessments and provide you feedback on it. There are templates there. We aren't throwing you to the wolves. If you go onto our website, and all the links will come out to everyone on this call after this, there are templates, and I'm pretty sure Central Coast Tri Clubs are all there as well as templates of what they've done when they sat down and said, how do we where are the risks for our events at Summerland Point? Graham, I'll get to you in a minute with your question. But to wrap up, Tom Bonifaux, who isn't necessarily your child safety, but he's your club governance, guidance on growth initiatives, which I might have spelt wrong, sorry, membership, New South Wales Interclub, Just Go, and a range of stuff, local governance relating to your club. So those are the people that you can go to for contact for assistance. And then finally, just to give you a bit of a lay of the land, you've got the Office of Sport and local government, who have got plenty of resources. You've got Sports Integrity Australia, plenty of resources. In fact, honestly, there's so many resources out there that it can be a bit hard to know where to start, and you might go, wow, which is why I said the handbook is kind of where we try to simplify what is quite a complex, or where there's a lot of information out there. Obviously, we've spoken about the Office of Children's Guardian, and ultimately the police are the best person if someone's in an immediate risk or harm, or you hear something that you think the police should be looking into. So that's the formal kind of presentation discussion, but really happy to field any questions, but flagging that I am not an expert on this topic, but hopefully Matt is. So let's start off with Graham. I'll see if I can unmute you. No, I can't do that. Okay, you're up, Graham. I'm not hearing you. I apologize. I think you've muted yourself again. Okay, well, maybe we'll jump to James, but we will definitely come back to you, Graham, if that's okay. Apologies, you were unmuted and then you remuted.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. That's a great presentation, mate, and really, really informative. I've actually got a lot out of your presentation. It'd be great to get all your resources that you were talking about sent out. I just had one question about the review process when developing our policies. Going through the training courses and the modules that the Office of the Children's Guardian provide, it said one of the best ways is to distribute to your members to review your policies and procedures. But bearing in mind that your members aren't necessarily subject matter experts and they may not be familiar with the context of how these policies are being put together. I just wanted some advice on the review process and how we should implement that with some maybe some best practice or some examples of some other clubs of how they've gone through the review process.
Well, I'll let Matt jump in because I'm not quite sure, but what I would say is I don't see any any requirement for you guys to be drafting your own policies necessarily. Like, you've got the 10 child safe standards, you've got the handbook. If you're implementing those 10 child safe standards, then you can be pretty confident that you're doing, I wouldn't say as much, right? Because you can always do more, but you're doing I certainly recognize that you guys don't come into an office every day and go, right, how can I make my triathlon club child safe? You are focused on swim, bike, run and giving everyone an amazing experience at that. Child safety is important. Don't think I'm dismissing it, but I wouldn't suggest you should start going and writing any policies, because as an affiliated club, you kind of fall under a lot of policies that already exist, including the national, and all members fall under the National Integrity Framework. So when you say you're writing policies, like I'm more referring to, if you read the 10 child safe standards, you can just say at a club, hey everyone, I'm James and I'm your child safe officer today. So if anyone doesn't feel safe or there's any problems, come and have a chat to me. Right? You can also double up as the race director for the day. Like that doesn't mean that you just have to sit there waiting for child safety or issues. Hopefully there's nothing. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what policies you'd be developing. That would be my first question.
No, that's fine. That's good to clarify, because going through the training modules that describe clubs needing to develop policies and procedures in line with the 10 child safe standards. So it's good to know that we don't have to develop those, and that we can fall under the existing ones of Triathlon New South Wales. Okay, that's really good.
Just to jump in there. So one of the difficulties with that e-learning is that there are, mainstream sports who have, like you, a national sporting body who has a national policy. And the reality is that does cover like 95% of your policy needs. There are other smaller fringe sports who are also doing the e-learning who don't have a national policy. They have to do it all themselves, right? And then you think of like small recreation providers as well, who have to do everything from scratch. But because your sport signed up to the National Integrity Framework, those national policies, which have been approved by Sport Integrity Australia, are really good. They are gold standard, so you can run with those. You don't want to amend those in any ways. You want to keep those consistent. And the idea there is that if there was anything that needed to be dealt with, say at the national level, like a really serious incident, we would want to have every triathlon club be using those same policies, so that everything's uniform. They're not having to figure out what version of what policy each club uses before they can investigate things. Where there is room for that review process would be with your risk management. So looking at child safe risk management, what are the areas that could be a risk to children? And where you can get that feedback process that can work really well is by turning to the children, the families who are members of your club and saying, hey, look, is there anything that you want to raise with us that you think might be a concern? Because sometimes what happens is we as adults sit down and there might be 10 of us and we bounce around ideas and we think we've covered everything off. But there's actually something going on at the club that only the kids have noticed. So if the kids never get asked, is there anything the club could do to keep you safer, you don't find out about the thing that happens in the changing rooms that you never actually see. So it's good to cast that net around your members. And one thing, and I'm more than happy for people to reach out to me and I can work on these sorts of things with them. One thing I encourage a lot of clubs to do is actually an end of season survey, where you just basically survey your members and say, hey, look, have there been any issues? Is there anything you think we could do better? And also, what's your favorite thing as well about the club? So get that positive reinforcement too. But by including them in that process and just getting their perspective, you might actually learn something about the club that as a committee, you might not actually have been aware of. And then that risk process is the one bit of the puzzle that as a club you have to do yourselves, and you will revisit that perhaps annually. And so there will be that revision of that, and you may, identify things that you didn't the previous year. Here's something we missed last year. Let's add that in. It's worth saying as well, though, with that review process, that actually should make this feel a little less daunting, because the reality is we don't have to get it perfect. Like, don't worry so much about getting it perfect that you don't do anything. Do your best, work at it. Talk to other people and get feedback and all those sorts of things. But just knowing that the next year you can always have another look at it and try and improve it.
Yeah, and unless I'm misreading the situation, I don't know of a single club in New South Wales that conducts like overnight camps in the junior space. So our risk profile as a sport is much lower in the club land because of what we do. Whereas there would be boatloads of sports out there that would take clubs that would take kids away on tours overnight to state cup and junior state cup and, you know, rugby league tournaments abroad and stuff like that. So yeah, our risk profile is definitely not the type that has OCG extremely worried about us, but that is not to say we should be complacent by all means. Graham, let's jump to you. I apologize that we
That's
missed
all
you
right.
last time.
Can you hear me now?
Much better.
Okay. Just with that, that's the page I want to talk about, that the one you've got up at the moment. If for some reason one of the parents within the club wanted to raise a matter, but they didn't want to raise it with that I'm the child safe representative and another person in our club up, they didn't want to raise it with us, who do they go to at New South Wales Tri?
So they're very welcome to raise it with me. You can give them my name and number.
Yeah.
If I get a call and they go, I might just say straight up, hang up. I'll have a chat to them, call the police, right? Like if it's at that level, or if it's if it was a curly question that potentially, so anything child safety, anything which relates to child safety, we can escalate to Sport Integrity Australia. So Sport Integrity Australia's remit is child safety matters. Everything else gets pushed back down to the state, back down to the national, and back down to the state. So if it is about you're not happy with the length of the swim leg, that's not going to go very far. Or the kids are unhappy that they got sent in the wrong direction on the cycle course and they missed the turnaround. That's not going to go very far up the chain. I'm happy to deal with that, but we'll deal with that. But if the issue is, and likewise, if there's a problem with me, then I would assume Deanna, who's the president on the board, would be where everyone would go for that, or AusTri if the issue is specific to me, or I am the issue.
Yeah, no, that's good, because we out of last year's session, we picked up on what Central Coast had done and did have a poster that's at each of the races, and that talks about our position on child safety. And I actually put your name down on it. I was just reconfirming that that's a point of escalation, should it need be.
Happy to.
Okay, thanks for that.
Point of escalation if it gets to that, if there's something that needs to be. So I'm not seeing any other questions. Let me just stop sharing. I'm not seeing any other questions, but what I would say is the fact that we've got 29 clubs on the line out of 60 in New South Wales, to me, is a really positive sign that the message that this is important is getting through. It was probably because I also put in the email, this is legislation, you can be fined, that scared people to coming on tonight. But I think it is important, right? As I said, it is only a problem till it's a problem. And then I've been in this role long enough to know it can tear clubs apart and it can ruin clubs. It can be a serious issue for sports and clubs. So if you take nothing else, the message is, if someone's in immediate concern, call the police, but there are plenty of resources and people who are available to assist you. Do not feel like you are in a raft out in the ocean trying to work out what you should do. So I think I'll leave it there, unless there's any other questions. But if anyone, tomorrow morning as you're going up and down the pool, think of a question. I cannot believe I forgot to ask Adam that. I've always got my phone on me. I'm always available on emails, and so is lots of people. So please feel free to reach out. But I'll just conclude by saying, Matt, thank you for once again supporting triathlon in New South Wales and everything you do for the Office of Children's Guardian. It's greatly appreciated, and for helping me when we have issues. And to all of you, thank you very much. We are coming into the season proper. So, that everyone's feeling that warmth in the air, that means summer's coming. So that means with summer, lots of events, lots of fun triathlon to come. But thank you very much, and have a great night. We'll leave it there.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Cheers.
Thank you, Adam. Ta.